Hi everyone, super excited to have you all back on our YouTube channel. So today we're going to be covering 1.2 of IGCSE Biology, Concept and Uses of Classification Systems. So this is also not that complicated, but obviously a little bit more complicated than our previous unit, which was extremely simple, and you guys do need to memorize all of these definitions. They're super important and they're asked quite a lot, so they're very easy marks to obtain, so do not lose them. So yeah, but moving on to today's agenda, essentially, we're going to be starting off with stating that organisms can be classified into groups by the features that they share. I guess that's super self-explanatory. I don't think I need to break that down further. Basically, what they're saying is if two organisms, for example, they have something in common, like they both have wings, okay, they can be put in the same group. They both have fins, they can be put into the same group. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. We're going to be diving into that in a bit more detail. Okay, so next you guys need to know the definition of a species, which is a super important definition for you guys' exam. So species is a group of organisms that can reproduce to produce fertile offsprings. Each and every component of a definition is super important, and you guys do need to memorize the whole definition without leaving any part. And that's because I'll give you guys an example. Okay, so basically, I'm sure you guys are aware that a horse and a horse can reproduce to produce a horse, right? But you guys may or may not know that a horse and a donkey can also reproduce and give us a mule. Maybe you guys have heard of a mule, maybe you guys haven't. But a mule is essentially infertile, so that's why a horse and a donkey cannot be seen or classified as the same species, right? So that's super interesting. But yeah. Another very, I think it's not really important for you guys, but you guys can know and memorize it if you guys want for general knowledge. But Carl Linnaeus was the first to classify organisms, right? Okay, super interesting. Okay, now explain that classification systems aim to reflect evolutionary relationships. For this, again, I would like to give you guys an example. Maybe you guys have heard, maybe you guys haven't, right? So around the 19th century, there was large-scale industrialization in England, because of which, okay, prior to this, all of this industrialization and everything, prior to this, if you circle back, gray moths were much more common than black moths, right? Okay, but then when all of this happened, there was large-scale coal production, which meant now the trees were covered with coal, which also meant now the tree barks were black. And if you guys are connecting the dots, that meant that the black moths were now able to camouflage much better, and they stood a higher chance of survival. Whereas the gray moths, they were easily detected, hunted, killed, all of that. They were not able to camouflage, they were not able to blend in, which is why they died. And that's why there was a reduction in their number and an increase in the number of black moths. So that's essentially evolution. And that's how the classification systems were also impacted by that. Okay, so moving on to different types of classifications. We have classification based on morphology, classification based on anatomy, classification based on DNA. Now these three are all super simple, but the most reliable one is classification based on DNA. I'm sure you guys have heard of DNA. It's the sequences of amino acids and proteins. It contains genetic information, all of that. But first, let's look at morphology. Morphology is basically the overall characteristics, the overall form, shape, size of an organism. So, for example, I can ask you guys to, differentiate between a red leaf that's long and a green leaf that's short. There's so many ways you guys can classify them, right? You can say, hey, one is red, one is green. So that's an obvious way of classification. You guys can also say, hey, one is short, one is long. That's also a way to classify them. So yeah, that's super interesting. Now moving on to anatomy, which is a bit more difficult, because anatomy is basically classification based on anatomy focuses on how the internal body structures of an organism look after you dissect them. Now, for example, you guys need to compare two organisms. You guys will have to dissect both of them and see how similar their internal body structures are, and that will be your classification based on anatomy. Now, DNA we already went over. We're going to go over DNA once again at the end of the video in a bit more detail. As you can see right here. Okay, perfect. Now we have essentially covered this objective 1, 2, binomial system we're going to start, and 3. Okay, so moving on, let's look at the binomial naming system and the dichotomous key. Two super easy parts of this unit. So basically, binomial system, as it was mentioned in the syllabus outline, it is an internationally agreed upon system in which a scientific name of an organism is made up of two parts. These two parts include the genus of the organism and the species of the organism. Essentially, what a genus and a species is, it's part of a much bigger hierarchy that we're going to study in this chapter as well. But for now, you guys need to know that in a binomial name or a scientific name, genus comes before these species, right? So if I were to give you guys an example of Homo sapiens, that's us right there, Homo sapiens. If you guys notice, only and only the H of this whole name is capital, everything else is lowercase. And that is the main rule that you guys need to remember, because it is tested quite a lot in the exam as well. So super important, these first two rules are what I just went over. These last two rules are something that I guess if you're an overachiever, you can look at them, but they're not that important really. It just says when printed, the scientific name must be in italics, and when written, the scientific name must be underlined, okay? So, yeah, okay. Perfect, right? Perfect. Great. Now moving on to the dichotomous key. I believe the best way to teach this and the best way to learn this is through an example, which we're going to be looking at right here. I've pulled this up from a past paper. And let's do it together, okay? Let's do it together. Let's try, okay? Keys can be used to identify a species. State the name of the type of key that uses paired choices of features. A dichotomous key uses paired choices of features. As you can see, each question is paired, okay? If there's this, go to this. If it's that, then go to that. A and B, A and B, A and B. That's a dichotomous key right there. Dichotomous key. Perfect. I hope there's no problems with that just yet. Okay, now moving on to how we're going to actually solve a question of the dichotomous key. So we're going to keep each of them as our subjects one by one. So first, let's start with this first guy, Amodremus beardi. I don't know if I said that right, probably not, but let's move on. Okay, so first they're asking you, is the beak longer than the head? You can see it's clearly not. The head is longer, so the beak is shorter. So the beak is shorter than the head, go to 3. We're going to 3. This is 3. Top part of the beak is hooked over the bottom part. It is not hooked over the bottom part. As you can see, the top part and the bottom part of this guy's beak are essentially the same length. There's no hooking over. Hooking over is happening here and here, not in the first one. So no. So we've got our first answer. This one is E. Super simple, and we're going to be solving the rest of them in the same exact manner. So moving on to this guy, rhinoceros, bucerus, rhinoceros, whatsoever. Okay, so is the beak longer than the head? I think it very clearly is longer than the head. So we're going to go to 2. Okay, 2 says beak curves upwards, beak does not curve upwards. Clearly, beak is curving somewhat downwards, so no, it does not curve upwards. So we go to 4. Here at 4, top part of the beak is shorter than the bottom part, or has a large projection above the beak. As you can see, this one is obviously right for this guy. This is the projection. It's quite huge and hard to miss. So the answer for this is B. We've got our second answer as well. You guys can just notice how easy it is to gain these 5 marks. So please do not lose them, okay? Great. Let me just write that in a... Yep, that's better. Moving on, we've got Pandion helitis something. Okay, forget my pronunciation, please. Anyways, beak is longer than the head? It's not. Beak is shorter than the head. We're gonna go to 3. Top part of the beak is hooked. It is. This is what I was saying, guys. Here, top part of the beak is very clearly hooked over the bottom part. So yes, it is indeed. Go to 5. Head has a stripe or head does not have a stripe? Head does have a stripe. See, guys, super apparent and so easy to spot. These are such easy marks to gain. Once again, we've got our next answer, F. Okay, now, I guess that's an eagle, right? That's right. Okay, so for Mr. Eagle, is the beak longer than the head? Nope, beak is shorter than the head. So we're going to go to 3. Top part is hooked over once again. So we're going to go to 5. 5, head has a stripe. Head does not have a stripe. You guys can see there's no stripe. So that's a D. Super simple. I hope you guys have gotten the hang of it by now, because I certainly have. Oh my god, this next one, I'm not gonna say the name. I'm not even gonna try to say the name. Study spot is gonna be cancelled before it even gets famous. Okay, anyways, let's start. Okay, beak is shorter than the head, beak is longer. In this case, the beak is longer than the head, so let's go with that. Beak is longer than the head. Go to 2. Beak curves upwards, beak does not curve upwards. We're going to 4. 4 says top part is shorter than bottom part of the beak. That is true. Top part is very much shorter than the bottom part. So this one is Mr. A. Okay, let's write that down. A. My bad. And obviously, you guys can see by now that the only letter missing is C, so it's pretty self-explanatory that this will be C. But for the sake of the video, let's do the last one as well. This one, oh my god, I'm not even gonna try anymore, I swear. I know I keep saying that, but now I'm actually not trying. Okay, beak is longer than the head. It is longer than the head. We go to 2. Beak curves upwards. It does curve upwards. C. That's how simple this dichotomous key question was. If you guys do find a harder one and you guys struggled with that, you guys can leave that in the comment box below. I will try to answer you guys. So yeah, now moving on to the last part of the video. Alright, so finally we are at the last part of unit 2 of chapter 1, using DNA for classification. This is super simple. Honestly, the best way to really get a hang of this is to do a simple book read or read the notes on the screen. Super simple. I will explain it though, but yeah, it's something that's super simple. Okay, so it is the last objective of our today's unit. Basically, as you guys know, over here we were discussing the different classification methods. There was classification based on morphology, anatomy, and DNA, and I mentioned that the one using DNA is the most accurate. Now we're going to find out how, why, all of that. Okay, so the sequences of bases in DNA and of amino acids and proteins are used as a more accurate way of classification. DNA is the molecule that carries genetic information for development, functioning, growth, all the misdescribed processes. Basically, DNA is the head of them, is the CEO of those, right? So this is the infamous structure of a DNA. I'm sure you guys have seen pictures or something like that. Like, it's a double helix. It's a helix, right? It's a double helix. If you guys were to unwind it though, it would look like this. This is a sugar phosphate backbone. These are the base pairings. And this is another. Oh my god, that's way thicker. They're usually the same thickness. But yeah. So my point is, and the nucleotides or the bases there's a base pairing between them that you guys do need to know. A pairs up with T, C pairs up with G. This is for DNA. Okay, that was for DNA. In RNA, there's no thymine, there's uracil. So A pairs up with U, and C still pairs up with G. But however, it's not relevant here because we're using DNA for classification, not RNA. I just thought I would throw that in there as an extra information. So basically, how biologists truly use this as a way of classification was that, for example, there were 2 organisms in front of them of different species, and they wanted to know how closely related they truly are. They would take the DNA of one of them and then take the DNA of the other one, and essentially look at the sequences of the bases in their DNA. Now they will look for more. They will look at the base sequences, right? And if the base sequences were more similar, that means that the 2 organisms shared they're more closely related to one another, and they shared a more common recent ancestor. However, if the base sequences did have not as many similarities, that means that they share a distant common ancestor. So that's it from me for this unit. See you guys in the next video.